Thank you very much.
Amazing.
It works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
We did realise when we took this slot that it was like the graveyard shift, and we thought, like, this is going to be a tough crowd, but you're all here, yeah?
Yeah.
Ready?
And thanks for being here.
Perfect.
Amazing. Well, great to see you all. As Danielle said, yes, thanks for being here. We're going to try to make this a little bit fun. You can see we've got a little bit of a cooking theme going. Hopefully that makes you both engaged and wrapping up your day a little hungry.
If not, we've probably got wine somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
yeah, we can continue the conversation over a drink.
Yeah.
But great to see you all. We'll quickly introduce ourselves. So I'm Madeleine Tierney. I am the lead for customer training within Google Cloud for customers that are in the UK, Ireland, the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa. So Danielle and I are going to talk to you about a few things today. The only caveat that I want to give from my perspective is I'm very much focused on Google Cloud. So my points, my perspectives are not reflective of all of Google. Happy to answer any questions about that if you have them, but I'm very much coming at this from like a cloud technical standpoint as it pertains to learning and development. So just a little disclaimer. Danielle?
If she doesn't know the answer, she can Google it.
Exactly, or you can Google it and check me.
I'm Danielle Ware. I am head of people development for a childcare company called Busy Bees. So we are based in the UK, but we're a global organisation. We operate in 10 countries. We've got over 1,000 nurseries that we provide early years childcare services, typically between the ages of 0 to 5. So it's that preschool early years activity that we operate in. So we've got about 25,000 people around the world, and around about 10,000 of them here in the UK. So hence why we're going to be talking about things at scale. Yeah.
So when Danielle and I first got together, as many of you may be thinking, we got an email that said, we would love to welcome you to the World of Learning Summit, and we would like for you two to pair up and talk about learning at scale. And we were both very excited, and we both also, I think it's safe to say, had a moment of, what are we,
how do we connect?
How do we connect?
Yeah.
So before we dive into kind of our recipe for success and sharing 2 examples of learning at scale from our perspectives, we just wanted to give you all a moment to either, maybe some of you are sitting next to others, take maybe a moment or 2 if you're comfortable, and either reflect yourself or chat to the person next to you about your either experience with learning at scale, if you have it, or maybe hesitations if you haven't done learning at scale. Maybe you've been a participant and you have some thoughts about what works and what doesn't. Mm-hmm. So if you'll just take a minute or 2 to kind of discuss amongst yourselves, if some folks want to share after that, we'll just use that to kind of kick off what will hopefully be a bit more of a conversation than death by PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Cool.
Go for it.
Yeah. So much. No.
Fab. Should we?
Yeah. Okay.
Has anyone got any experiences? Has anyone got a word that, like the idea, training at scale? What's the sort of words that you're saying? What's coming to mind? Is anyone willing to? Who was that? Scary. Scary. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
Expensive. Yeah.
Also fair.
Not just cost, like also expensive
Time.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scale, you kind of think of everything goes bigger with it.
10 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Other thoughts or
Inconsistencies.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Go on, Vic. Logistical nightmare. Now,
Yes.
she says that because Vicky, who is the absolute masters behind us training at scale, has to logistically plan everything, and I give her that nightmare. So yeah, logistical nightmare. But scale, everything feels bigger, scarier. A lot of it was engagement. More, less engagement.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And pressure.
Yeah.
Often things big at scale feel like they're going to be much more visible.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes as L&Ders we want to maybe just fly under the radar, just do our thing and hope that people at least scored it a 10 out of 10 on the happy sheet and then they leave. Sometimes we want an easy life, yeah? But we don't really.
Yeah.
What's the point in that, yeah?
Yeah, good feedback. I think overwhelmingly hesitant, right? Overwhelmingly, eek, yikes, expensive, scary, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I think we both relate to that very much so. We were both talking about how when we had the challenges that we had, it was a bit of a but we have no other options kind of moment.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So two chefs in a kitchen,
Yes.
like we talked about. Danielle and I got together and kind of said, okay, tell me about your background. I'll tell you about my background, and let's find where we can tell one cohesive story here.
Yeah.
So I'll start by talking a little bit about kind of high level where we were coming from at Google Cloud. So like many of the words that you all mentioned, cost, scale, quality, or engagement, lack thereof, were all considerations that we had to take into effect when we built two programs, which I'll speak about today. One of them is called Get Certified. The other one is called Launchpad for Women. The background behind these two programs was essentially a collaboration with many different functions within Google Cloud to try to seed the technical market with more individuals who are certified in Google Cloud technology. So it's a very measurable kind of statistic for us in terms of X number of people in X market hold Google Cloud certifications. And likewise, we had the data that showed X number of people globally do not have technical certifications, and therefore, projecting out 10-ish years, we're gonna have a really big problem on our hands. We actually already have a problem right now. So what can we do to solve that? So we'll both talk in kind of a similar framework regarding our challenges, the kind of keys of success that we had. But at a high level, I would say some of the big factors that came into play for us were, as some of you said, massive, massive scale. So we're talking, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of people. Global audience. So not only are we talking different locations, but some people who sit in an office, some people who have internet connection, some people who don't, some people who are engineers, some people who've never, had any experience in cloud whatsoever. How do we kind of accommodate all of those different learners with essentially one or two different programs? How do we make it very inviting and have that result of the certification at the end be the same for everybody? So scale, but standardization. We also had a handful of different resources at our fingertips, which is where we have an interesting kind of difference. We were able to pull together our marketing teams, our kind of customer-facing teams, certification teams, all of these. It really took a village to build these two programs. And the outcome being exactly, ultimately what we wanted. The market being more seated with skills and reaching a broader audience at the end of the day. And Danielle had a very different kind of initial challenge, so I'll let you talk about that.
Absolutely. So as I've mentioned, we're a childcare business, but childcare is not just babysitting. It isn't drop-in. Anybody got children in daycare, nurseries? Yeah. Anyone in Busy Bees? No, God, you should totally come to us because I'm going to tell you why. But we as a business want to, we're really big in the UK, we're big globally, but what we want to do is be the best educator. We want to contribute to the future generations of children's development. And we know, and if anybody's done any work on how the brain develops, there is so much happening in those first 5 years of life. And what we wanted to do was really understand how we could affect that, not only by giving children the best start in life and giving them a great place to come and be looked after while their parents may be at work. Actually, we want to be able to cement the foundations, the skills that needed to be developed in early years so that's set up for future life success. So essentially, we want to be the place where you can come and your children can grow to be the best versions of themselves later on in life. So all sounds great. Wonderful. Spent a lot of time doing a lot of research into the latest academic insights into how the brain works, how do children develop, what's the latest thinking, and what gets the best from children. Play is a big part of it. You'd expect to see in there, having fun, but also really starting to understand how does the brain work. And our knowledge and understanding of how that works has exponentially increased in recent years. So what were we missing in children's development that we could bring into how educators were trained? So the idea being that we already have, all of our nurseries have to be legally, but also have great educators, people who are trained professionally and go to school, do their apprenticeships, go to university to become educators. What we wanted to do was take that to the next step. So kind of similar, same but different. We had an audience of people who, were already professional. They already had great skills and great knowledge, but what we wanted to do was take that to the next level, to really help our educators on the ground understand, I've got a group of, say, 5 children that I look after. How do I adapt the education that I'm given to that child, to that child, to that child? So it was about personalization. So for us, we had kind of a similar thing of we wanted to standardize the approach of how we thought about our curriculum and how we deliver our childcare to children. But just like our children, and this is the thing, isn't it, in L&D, we forget this, every individual child needs to be treated uniquely, but we forget sometimes that adults also need to be treated completely uniquely as well. So my challenge was less around hundreds of thousands of people at scale. Mine was tens of thousands, but how do we ensure that there's absolute personalization through the experience with an element of standardization so that people knew and understood the research, but they could personalize how they delivered that?
Yeah, and I think transparently, we, Danielle and I were talking about this kind of in prep, and when I was reflecting on kind of how we made some decisions and how we built, while we are at the end of the day also reaching individual learners who are on the same learning journey, again, that standardization for us is incredibly valuable. The content doesn't change, right? It doesn't matter if you're learning how to become a cloud engineer in Northern Africa or if you're learning how to become a cloud engineer in London, you're learning the same foundation for how to do that. And so transparently, there were moments where because of the scale and because of the standardization for us, it was the personalization aspect kind of was lower on the list of priorities for us because while we, and I'll speak about this in a little bit, while both of our models, and especially ours too, included a lot of feedback and accommodating and changing based on that feedback at an individual level, we had to kind of have a real look in the mirror and be honest with ourselves moment where we're not going to, at an individual level, really be able to build a program that works specifically for every single use case at this kind of scale. So it was a pretty stark realization that we had to come to. And I think it's just worth mentioning because it's one of those things where you say, we can do a lot of things right, but we can't do everything perfectly. And it's better to do most of it as good as we can.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit more then about your challenge?
Yeah. So like I said, training at scale, training a lot of people. And we really had to kind of try to, with a massive ambition, try to narrow it in to a few starting points. So within the Google Cloud portfolio, we have about 11 different certifications that folks can pursue. They start at varying levels of you have no background, you're from a business degree or world, all the way to our most advanced machine learning AI engineers, for instance. And what we had to do is essentially pick that starting point. Where can we hit the most amount of people? Where are we going to get the most interest? Where do we see the biggest gap? And so we identified 2 certifications to start with, which were our Associate Cloud Engineer and our Professional Cloud Architect certification. The idea there being those are kind of good baselines for the majority of people. And then folks can kind of use that as the confidence builder. Hey, check the box, did this thing. Here's how I can move on. The other challenge that we have, and we often hear about in terms of training in the Google Cloud ecosystem, is cost, right? Cost and time. So we all have similar challenges. I don't have enough time to learn. I don't have the funding myself or organizationally to support it. And I think the other one that we often hear is I don't know where to start. So we've talked about where to start. From the cost perspective, this was the first of its kind program that we designed and offered at no cost to individuals at our customers. So we essentially said, if you're interested, we want to hear from you, and we'll give you the framework to be successful. The other challenge that we had is, okay, so what is that framework, right? You can access our content in many different ways today as just a user of Google or Google Cloud, but how can we package up the right content that both gives you that accountability to complete the learning journey? Because the fact of the matter is, getting Google Cloud certified is pretty tricky. Even folks who have a good technical baseline find it to be very challenging. So how can we make it something that folks are excited about, that's accessible and doable, and encourage folks to continue on the learning journey? So we said, okay, we need to time box it. We need to put a particular time frame around how long people will spend on this, and let's start with something 8 to 10 weeks, right? So we kick off the learning journey and we get you incentivized to start by saying, please attend a one-day instructor-led course. So that really gives you that sense of community, because the other challenge that we see in a virtual learning environment, we've all been on Zoom, we've all been in a webinar, it's really hard to stay focused. So let's kick it off, let's create that community, let's get you engaged in the beginning, and then keep you engaged. So we wanted to build those different accountability measures. And so we said, okay, great. We're going to have a technical mentor who's available to you as you have questions and are learning on demand over the course of the next 6 or 8 weeks. We're also going to build in those accountability measures with online virtual exam prep sessions. So another challenge being, how do you actually get to the end of that journey and be successful in certifying? All of these factors were top of mind for us when creating this program. So not only was it reaching that audience at scale, it was how do we keep those people engaged? How do we make sure that they're successful and want to keep learning with us and that their learning was effective? How do we take into consideration all of these people from all different backgrounds and make it an inclusive and exciting environment for them? And ultimately, how can we upskill anyone, anywhere, at any time? And I think the other thing that I'll mention, which was a bit of an iteration of that program, addressed a bit of a different challenge, which was folks are, as I said, generally time-strapped, cost-strapped, and in some cases in the technical ecosystem, just straight up intimidated by learning, right? Like, I don't know how many of you have embarked on a technical training journey. Yeah, exactly. No, would never. Or maybe you've tried and you're like, oh my gosh, this is awful, or I'm so not suited for this. That's how my journey in tech started, was a lot of challenging trainings where I had to convince myself that I was learning something for the better. So then we started to think about ways that we could, and I'll talk a little bit more about this and kind of like some secrets and key ingredients, but we started to think about ways to tailor to specific audiences. So yes, we still want to reach the masses. Yes, we still want to focus on a few foundational certifications, for instance, but then we tailored into a program which we called Launchpad for Women, which was specifically focused on upskilling women in cloud. And so that was kind of a different flavor of trying to address the same challenge, the same skills gap, with similar resources from the first pilot that we did, and build on that to really accommodate a specific audience of people that otherwise are kind of intimidated by getting into the technical space. So again, not a simple recipe. Lots of different challenges that come into play, and all trying to solve what seems like, on paper, quite a simple problem: get people more skills and attain more certifications. So many different aspects to it. Danielle, talk about your challenge.
You can see the key word there in blue. Mine's without. So we don't have much tech, do we, Vic? So as an organisation, as you can imagine, the children are at the heart of everything. So for those of you who are experienced with understanding children in nurseries, the educators don't have access to tech. They have to lock their phones. Any digital resources that they've got have to be put away. It's a safeguarding challenge for us. So all learning typically has to be very booked, because obviously they have to be out of ratio if we need to cover that staff. So we have all of these people up and down the country, and yet we can't easily reach out to them. We can't make it anywhere, anytime, at any point, because they can't be available at any time, anywhere. There's very specific timeframes that we can operate in. And we don't have an LMS. We don't have technology. I've wanged on about that enough in my organisation, but we didn't have it. And often that can feel like, what am I going to do? Can't do then at a scale. If I've got no tech, I can't do it at scale. That was the first kind of key thought of scary. Oh my God, how am I going to take this out? And we don't have a massive pot of money. There isn't an endless money pit, just like many organisations. We have to cut our cloth accordingly. It's a challenging market to be in. There is not a load of money to throw at this as well. And equally, there isn't a load of resource. And I think one of the things in terms of really understanding, and what we wanted to do, and one of our challenges around scaling something like this, is we believe very firmly as a philosophy that every child is unique. I've mentioned that already, and that we tailor the learning experience to the child, because every child will go on a different development journey. A lot of nurseries talk about being school ready, getting kids ready to go to school. But sometimes that journey is not the right time for that child. They are not necessarily going to be school ready at 5. So how do we also then think about the adults who are looking after those children? They are not going to be ready at the end of a very structured, designed 12-week program to hit the ground running and look after those children in the way that they need to. So for my challenges, they were very much around, how do we think about this experience that we've got to create? I've got to replicate the experience that I want a child to have in the experience that an adult will have. And I've got to do it at scale with no tech, no resource, pretty much no money. So impossible, right? How on earth did we do it? But this is where we started to realize that we've got quite a lot of commonality, I suppose, in our approach. And this is where the making a recipe, making a meal kind of thing came into it, because we were like, at the end of the day, it is just kind of like cooking a meal. When you think about it, there are several steps on there that you have to go through in order to get there, just like in learning and development. So do you want to take us through your masterful meal?
Yeah. So the Google approach, and I kind of laughed when I pulled this image. I was trying to decide between two images. One, which is, essentially a big food hall or German beer hall, call it whatever you will. And the other being this, but everybody has a computer and we're in a hackathon. But really the idea here is going back to that, hitting as many people as possible in kind of a scrappy way. So unlike what Danielle talked about with that kind of individual level personalization, we were thinking very much at kind of that one meal that can accommodate many type of approach. And that maybe if you have for instance, like a dietary requirement, you may have to figure that one out on your own a little bit. We're going to give you 90% of the foundations to get to what you need as an end result. But if you need to make some adjustments on your own, please do, right? Take care of yourself, do what you need to do. But that may not be coming within the scope of this program. And that's okay. That's a decision that we had to make. So this is one of the things that Danielle and I had in common, which I think is really interesting. And to most folks in L&D won't be anything revolutionary, right? Which is, we built a pilot program. As I said, we said, let's focus in on a few things, 2 certifications, 1 certification in the case of Launchpad for Women, and let's just get started. We had more data at our fingertips than we knew what to do with, as we often do in the Google world, which is a blessing and a curse, right? So we said, we we're gonna struggle if we sit here and try to think of too many different ways to do this, because much like cooking, there are a million different ways that we could build a program to reach people at scale. And so we really took into consideration those important factors. What's our end result? Getting people certified. What resources do we have? We did have the content that was very kind of lather, rinse, repeat. We had it available in different formats to be able to reach people in different audiences. So live, on demand, hands-on labs that accompany all of that to ensure that you actually understand what you're hearing. We had all of those resources to pull together, and we were very fortunate for that. And so really then it was just about packaging the right mix of things, adding in that accountability with exam review sessions, getting feedback from real people ahead of building the program, but also kind of taking what we thought would work based on a data approach and putting it out there and taking the feedback as we went and built. So I talked a little bit about the globalization and the global approach. And I'll be honest, when we started this program, these two programs, we only offered it in English. And again, that was a strategic decision around, we think we can get a large audience of people. I should not say most people because that's absolutely not true. We think we can get a large audience of people in an English-speaking training. We think we can attract a large audience of people if we make it engaging and offer it without the cost limitation. And then we started to explore, after that initial pilot, where did we get feedback from people who were in other locations? What other language demands exist? And we know when we're talking at a global scale, hundreds of languages are out there. People need to learn in all different ways, both modality and language. And how do we make those accommodations based on what we're hearing from people? And the next decision that we made for one of our programs was actually to launch in the Japanese market. So we had a lot of interest in Japan. We had the capability to train in Japanese, and we thought that that would be a good kind of branch out approach. So that was the exploring language localization and kind of building on top of that pilot. Going back to content, as you were saying, LMS, lack of an LMS, content was for us queen. You could call it king, I call it queen. Content was queen, right? So having that content that was standardized for us, we didn't have to take the extra step that you at Busy Bees did and really think about, how does this land with each individual person? It's really, this is how we train on these subjects. So here it is in the different formats, and take it as you will. And the content was really the thing that made it for us. Yeah. And we spend tons of time in a year, in a month, in a week, in a day, building our content, right? We have a whole team of folks who are constantly updating our content based on new products, making adjustments based on features that have been deprecated. That is its own initiative that we were lucky enough to be able to kind of tap into and build off of. And then very much like at Busy Bees, we had to focus on one global standard. What's gonna work for a vast majority of people? Not everybody, absolutely not everybody, but a vast majority of people. And being very clear with people about what they could and couldn't expect from us. So I think that's a big thing. I was saying we had to sacrifice that idea of we're not going to be able to necessarily reach everybody. And I think one of the examples with that was we got a lot of feedback that was like, hey, super interested. This is a requirement for my job, or I'm trying to switch careers, and this program is perfect for me, but you're only starting to offer it in the EMEA region, and I'm in America. And so we took all that kind of feedback and parked it for a while, really. We said, okay, great, we hear you, thank you. You're welcome to join the program from America. It's gonna be a little brutal because of the time difference, but feel free to participate, and we'll see what we can do for you in the future. So we did have to be pretty clear with people about what was and wasn't available. It was the first time we were doing something like this. It was the first time we were ever reaching a scale like this. And we just realized there was a lot of things that maybe we wouldn't be able to do. Being honest and transparent with people about that was something that was very important to us. And I've talked about this throughout, but the constant feedback, both internally and externally. Externally, of course, in programs like these, is I would argue, the most valuable, but the internal feedback too. Hey, I've heard from XYZ customer or friend or even team internally, this is really brutal to do and we shouldn't do it this way. We are manually reviewing hundreds of thousands of entries. What in the world are we doing? We can do this better. And having that collaboration across teams to keep each other in check and say, there's a better way to be doing this, there's a different way to be doing this. And all of that, I think, really helped us get the pilot off the ground and be successful, but really helped us get to a model like this, where we can lather, rinse, repeat, keep growing, keep accommodating folks all around the world, and have all of our teams internally want to continue to participate. So Danielle, how about?
So, obviously quite a different approach to Google. And interestingly, this is where we were talking about it. We also had to go for a pilot approach, but for a very different reason. So we had our research, we had the information, we had the guidance around what makes a great educational practice for our children, how it aligns to a curriculum. We had the best thinkers, the best minds. But what we didn't have was hordes of content. We didn't have the resource to go away and create that. So for the pilot program, what we did was give it to the people. Give it to the people who we were going to have deliver this activity. Give it to the centres, nurseries, we call them centres, and get them to experience what it's like to take this resource, take this content, take this knowledge, these materials. How would you utilize it? How would you adapt this to your needs? How would you engage with it? What would you do? So we took a very bottom-up approach, I suppose, in comparison to Google, where Google is the expert in the knowledge. We had pulled all of this research, and then we gave it to our nurseries and said, how do we roll this out? What do we do with it? And they spent the best part of 3 months really having a look through. What that led to was a fantastic experience of co-creation. They were looking at the resources and the materials, and they were saying, Danielle, do you know what we did? We created this. I've made you, this is like so heartwarming, I've made you your training resources and materials. I mean, obviously they needed a bit of work, but it was absolutely amazing. They were able to capture videos, interactions, they were documenting their best practice, they were creating content for us because they really enjoyed what it was that they were doing. It was so intrinsic to their role that they were so bought in that they became my kind of people to go out, my advocates. Yeah. And they were the people that we relied upon in those 3 months to kind of go, so what do we do now? So now that we've done it with you guys, and we purposefully picked pilot centres which were varying in capability, either newness of line management, new centre directors, or we had people who were really established, had double outstandings, at the epitome of like what it means to be a great educational practice. If we were to give that to them, were they just going to reject it and go, I already know it, I don't need to do this? Actually, we saw they embraced it and were like, actually, do you know what? We love this, and this is really helping us articulate to our apprentices. It helped with new recruits. There was something different in each centre that they took away from the research and from the materials. And as a result of that, what it meant was that we were able to create, kind of in the same way, a standardized guidance. Like, we needed an approach which kind of said, this is the best of the research that's out there. This is what it looks like. This is what it shows us. This is what it tells us. This is how you can best develop like fine motor skills with children, and this is how to start and progress that and enhance it. But as an educator, it's down to you at the end of the day. We did not give them a textbook and said, right, 9 o'clock in the morning, you're going to do this with all the children, and we've got that in all of our nurseries. Absolutely not. It is down to those educators to work out, how do I take the guidance, the standardized materials, and what do I do with it? So from this is kind of where what do you Americans call it? What was a
potluck?
A potluck.
Yeah.
It was more
Bring
like a
your
pot.
own.
Do you know that, Peter? Is that it's like in my head I was like, instead of it being a kind of structured meal where you go and get it and then you go and interact with it, it's more like a gathering. It's more like, actually, it's about the experience that you create. The learning experience is the most important part not necessarily the process that I needed to take people through from A to B to get them experienced. So actually bring in your own self. And what I ended up with was a heck of a lot of sous chefs, people who were willing to go and make the meal with me out there in the business. And that was exactly what we needed, because I had no resource. Have I mentioned that? No tech. Did I mention that?
Oh, sorry. So as two chefs who've tried to do the same thing, we kind of tried to say, okay, what was both? It seems like we maybe both had the same secret sauce.
Yeah.
And in fact, we did. And despite all of the differences, the few similar things that we had were, this was hard, but it was very valuable. The time, the energy was worth it, right? And the importance of finding the combination of keeping your learners and those that you're teaching accountable, engaged, but also being realistic and allowing that level of flexibility, which I think you just talked about, adaptation.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think at scale, you know, and I guess in Google as well, you have this sense of fear that what happens if I release this out into the world? Are people going to do what I want them to do? And I think that's one of the key things in L&D sometimes, is that we think that we're designing this perfect learning experience for individuals and they're going to have the best experience ever. And then we wonder why when our feedback comes through and people go, actually, I would have done it maybe a bit more like this, or I wanted a bit more like that. And that's one of the things, when you're at scale, you can't account for, you know, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's needs. It has to have an element of absolute accountability of your own learning, and we need to be accountable for that, but also build in flexibility. But one of the things that we both kind of said was, it's a bit like feel the fear and just get on with it. And I think anything with at scale is always start with a pilot. Like, I know that sounds like a no-brainer, but how many times do we get caught up in the, oh my God, I've got to do this, and I've got to design this massive leadership program, and I've got 500 leaders to take through, and suddenly it becomes this huge thing, when actually you can just bite off a small chunk and make a start.
Yeah, exactly. So, bam. Yeah. I don't know if you all know Emeril Lagasse, but, you know, famous for that. Boom. There it is. So in conclusion, kind of what was the impact? What's next? I think when I'm speaking from our perspective, I've mentioned it, right? The impact was in many ways what we set out to achieve. Thousands of new people were certified. We got lots of good feedback. And now we're really starting to think about how can we expand that, what other markets, you know, regions. We're pretty far and wide at this point in terms of these programs, but maybe some more focused verticals, for instance. How else can we expand this learning that we got from building these programs into other areas, and how can we continue to grow?
Absolutely. And certainly for us at Busy Bees, I mean, I had to utilize the resources that are available. So we built in mechanisms into our existing operational activity to be able to monitor and measure the impact of the learning. And also did, as part of our normal engagement survey, we also asked people about how they felt about the learning that they'd gone through this program. Every individual had obviously experienced something slightly different, because each centre took their own approach to how they rolled that out. But what we actually found was that 63% of people who had gone, the people who'd gone through the program were 63% more engaged as a result of going through it. So obviously we were rolling this out over time, and that has led to an improved retention and a reduction in our turnover, which is absolutely, you know, unheard of. We've actually seen double digits reductions on our turnover in the last 6 months of last year, which is absolutely phenomenal for a business which, if you think about what we are in childcare, it's relatively low paid, it's in a competitive market in terms of workforce. People could very easily, for 20p, go and decide to do another job for 20p more down the road. And that is something that we really wanted to do, because actually by giving the ownership to our people, they felt like they owned the learning experience. They felt like they owned their profession, which is absolutely incredible. And we're continuing to do the personalization now. We've got things like induction. We've got some really successful masterclasses that are going on. We're podcasting, we're recording people's information, and we're making it available to people so that we can continue the journey and continue to iterate as we go.
I think, Danielle, you said something interesting about the measuring. And we were talking, and I think one thing that's really important that we kind of realized that we share in common too was some of this isn't so measurable, right?
Yeah.
But we had an interesting other commonality, which was organizationally and on a personal level, I would say too, although as we said, it took a village. We both knew for our organizations, for our brands, for all of that these types of programs were the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that was really a driver, I think, because some things you can't measure and some things may not have a direct ROI, but they are the right thing to do for your future success, for your customers' future success, for your employees' future success.
And our next seminar will be about how we both disagree with trying to chase down financial ROI, but we'll come to that another day. And that is it. So just really quickly, there's no single recipe, no one size fits all. Understand your audience, really get to know them, be creative with what you do have, and adapt and refine as you go.
And just get going.
Just get going.
Thank you.